I never imagined my worst nightmare would come from the person who used to sleep beside me as a child, share secrets under blankets, and swear we'd always protect each other. I never imagined that the one I once called my safe place would grow into the one I needed to protect my son from. For years, I believed my sister loved my son the way an aunt should, with warmth, playfulness, and pride. I thought their bond was pure, harmless, but the moment I read that message, my entire reality flipped upside down. My heart didn't just break, it caved in on itself, because in just one sentence I realized that what I believed was affection, was manipulation, what I thought was family, was something far more twisted. And my son, my sweet, trusting 15-year-old son, was in the center of it. My name is Leona Harris. I'm 37 years old, and I've learned that silence can be a mother's greatest weapon if you wait long enough to strike. Subscribe if you believe some betrayals deserve more than forgiveness, and leave a comment if you've ever had to protect someone you love without showing your pain. That night started like any other. My son, Julian, had just finished dinner and left his phone on the couch before heading upstairs to shower. I was picking up after him like always, cups, socks, wrappers, when I noticed his phone light up. I didn't think twice. I picked it up to move it to the charger, but the screen unlocked and showed a message, not from a classmate, not from some girl at school. It was from my sister. "You know I only think about you at night, when I can't sleep." At first, I blinked. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it wasn't meant for him. But her name was right there, Auntie L, a name we'd used for years. My hands started shaking as I opened the thread, and what I saw, it didn't feel real. Messages spanning weeks, even months, her calling him handsome, grown, saying things like, "One day you'll understand how I really feel," or "I wish I could hold you without guilt." There were photos, selfies in bathrobes, lips pouted, cleavage exposed just enough to make my stomach churn. She talked about how age is just a number, how he made her feel seen, how she had never felt this kind of connection before. And my son, he didn't even know what to do with it. His replies were short, confused. Mostly emojis, a few awkward lol-s. He wasn't flirting, he wasn't leading anything, he was just trying to keep up, trying to understand something he should never have had to process at his age. I sat there, frozen, staring at a screen that felt radioactive. Every instinct in my body told me to scream, to drive to her house and tear the door off its hinges. But I didn't. I didn't because deep down I knew she would find a way to twist it. She always did. Alyssa was that person, charming, clever, always one step ahead with her words. She'd make it sound like a joke, say I was overreacting, accuse me of being insecure or jealous, tell everyone Leona always hated how close I was with Julian, and if she cried just enough, someone would believe her. So I said nothing. I woke up the next morning and pretended everything was fine. I made pancakes, laughed when Julian spilled syrup on the counter, kissed his cheek before he left for school, and then I picked up the phone and invited my sister over for dinner. She came with a bottle of wine and that fake giggle that used to make me laugh when we were kids. She sat at my kitchen table, right across from my son, and smiled like nothing in the world was out of place. She asked about school, complimented his haircut, called him so mature these days. Her hand touched his wrist for just a second too long when he passed her the salt, and I smiled back at her. I smiled because she didn't know I'd already backed up every message. Screenshots, cloud storage, password, protected files. I even emailed a copy to myself under a different name. That night, after she left, I placed a recording device under the couch cushion. The next day, I ordered a hidden camera disguised as a picture frame. I wasn't going to the police, not yet. I wasn't even going to her job. I wanted more than justice. I wanted the truth. I wanted to understand how far she was willing to go, because if she could do this in secret, what might she do when no one was watching? Over the next 2 weeks, I watched her test boundaries like a predator testing the edge of a cage. She told my son things like, "Some people won't understand us," and "Your mom doesn't have to know everything." She made jokes about kissing him, about what it would be like if they were the same age, and my son, he didn't get it. He was uncomfortable. I could see it in how stiff he became. how much less he smiled when she was around, and still. He never told me because that's what guilt does. It makes the victim feel like the criminal. I realized then that I had two jobs. One was to bring Alyssa down. The other was to protect my son from ever thinking this was his fault. I started therapy under the radar, called the school, explained it as stress counseling. His therapist was kind, gentle. She asked the right questions, and little by little, he started opening up. Not about the messages, not yet, but about how she made him feel. He said things like, "She gets too close," and sometimes she looks at me weird, and she told me not to tell you stuff like it was a game. That was enough. I had the messages. I had the recordings. I had my son's unease, documented by a professional. I had everything I needed to destroy her, but I wasn't done collecting, because sometimes revenge isn't about what you do in the moment. It's about what you build in silence until it's too late for them to escape. And she had no idea she'd already stepped into the trap. I watched her brush her hair behind her ear and laugh at something my son said, like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't the reason I stayed up all night wondering how deeply she had already damaged him. That evening, Alyssa acted completely normal, smiling, teasing, complimenting his growing muscles as if she didn't know how wildly inappropriate it all was. It was a game to her, a performance, and when she caught me watching her from across the room, she smiled, soft, sweet, and wicked beneath the surface. It made my skin crawl, but I kept smiling back. I had to. Because if I let even a flicker of my rage show, she'd know I was onto her, and if she knew, she'd start covering her tracks. So I let her keep talking, let her keep crossing lines, let her feel like she was winning. The next day I called her. I told her I wanted to talk, just the two of us. We met at a small diner not far from where we grew up. The place hadn't changed much. Same red vinyl booths, same faded jukebox in the corner. It felt like a memory I didn't want anymore. Alyssa slid into the seat across from me, looking effortlessly casual, like we were just two sisters out for coffee. She didn't even bring up Julian. She talked about a yoga class, a new dating app. She even laughed when she said, "There are days I swear your son is more mature than most of the men I date." I said nothing, just stared at her, and she must have felt it, the weight behind my eyes. Because she stopped smiling. Finally, I said, "He's 15. She looked down at her coffee, swirling it slowly, before saying, "He's not a baby anymore, Leona." That sentence hit like a knife between my ribs. I couldn't believe she said it. Bold, blunt, like what she was doing was acceptable. He still asks me to check his closet for monsters when it storms. I replied. She shrugged. Kids grow up faster now, especially boys. He's smart, sensitive. He gets me. You're his aunt. I said slowly, deliberately, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. She didn't flinch. I never laid a hand on him. But you wanted to. I whispered, and her eyes flickered. In that moment, I saw the real her. The version she kept hidden beneath all that charm. The one who didn't feel shame, just hunger. A twisted kind of craving that she had justified in her own sick mind. "I'd never hurt him," she said flatly. "But you already have." She didn't respond, just sat back and crossed her arms like she was done talking. And in a way I was glad, because her silence told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't confused. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she didn't intend to stop. I stood up, dropped a 20 on the table, and walked out without looking back. From that moment on, I stopped waiting for her to reveal herself. I started building my case faster, sharper, more methodically. I pulled every voice note off Julian's phone. I backed up all the photos she'd sent. I organized the messages by date, referenced with school holidays, so I could show she targeted him when I wasn't home. But while I worked in the shadows, Alyssa grew bolder. She began showing up more often, sometimes uninvited. She'd bring over takeout, say she missed her nephew, linger in the hallway too long after hugs. She'd whisper to Julian when she thought I wasn't watching, "You're so special to me. Don't ever feel like you have to choose. No one understands us." And he just looked confused, uncomfortable. Lost, it made me feel like I was failing him, like every second she spent near him was undoing years of love and safety I had built around his world. I wanted to scream at her, drag her out of my house by the roots of her hair. But I didn't, because if I reacted too soon, she'd pull away, disappear, and then all I'd have were shots no one would want to believe. I needed more. I needed her voice. I needed proof so undeniable that even she couldn't spin her way out of it. So I played along. I told her I was working on forgiveness, that maybe I had overreacted. I said I just wanted our family to feel normal again. I pretended to doubt myself, let her believe I was cracking. And she took the bait. She started texting more often, now bragging that she and Julian were closer than ever. She sent a message one night saying, "I always knew he'd grow into the kind of man I deserve." I almost threw my phone across the room. But instead, I responded, "Maybe we should talk, woman to woman." She replied with a winking emoji. The next day, I invited her over while Julian was at a friend's house. I poured her a glass of wine. I let her talk, and she did, about how misunderstood she felt, about how no one ever really saw her, about how she felt something with Julian that she'd never felt before, even with grown men. I recorded every word. When she left, I sank to the kitchen floor and sobbed, not because I had doubts anymore, but because now I knew she had none either. She believed what she was doing was love, not sickness, not crime. Love, and that terrified me. I listened to the recording again and again. Then I saved it to 3 different drives. I emailed it to myself under an alias. And finally, I reached out to a legal advisor. I didn't give my name, just asked what someone could do if they had voice recordings of an adult grooming a minor. The answer was clear, but I wasn't ready yet, because part of me still needed one last thing, something bigger than just legal consequences. I didn't want her arrested and forgotten. I wanted her exposed, humiliated. I wanted everyone who ever praised her to hear what I had heard, the truth behind that charming smile. And so, I waited just a little longer. She had confessed. Now I needed to hand her the rope. She thought I was letting go, that I was beginning to see things from her perspective, that I, the mother of the boy she had tried to claim, was actually starting to understand her twisted version of love. The more I stayed silent, the more she let her guard down, and that was exactly what I needed, because Alyssa didn't know. I was documenting everything, not just the words, but the timing, the tones, the patterns of her behavior. She thought she was gaining ground, but in truth, I had already opened the cage, and now I was just waiting for her to walk in. She started texting me things like, "I'm so glad we're close again, and it means the world that you trust me with Julian." I'd respond with short, casual replies, just enough to keep her convinced. She invited herself over more frequently now. She'd show up with takeout, stay long past dinner, offering to help Julian with his homework or folding laundry like she belonged here. I let her because every hour she spent in that house was another hour of evidence, another line crossed, another moment she believed was harmless, and I knew, soon, those moments would bury her. Meanwhile, Julian didn't know everything. I had only told him what was necessary, that some things Alyssa said weren't okay, that he had the right to feel uncomfortable, that no one, not even family, had the right to make him feel confused about boundaries. He was still in therapy, slowly beginning to understand that what felt weird wasn't his fault. And most importantly, he was starting to pull away from her on his own without needing me to force it. That mattered more than anything. I didn't want him to feel broken. I wanted him to recognize, with clarity and strength, that she was the one who crossed the line. But Alyssa noticed the shift. She asked me one night, "Is Julian mad at me?" I kept my tone gentle, careful. "He's a teenager. They go through moods." She laughed, but I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She was afraid of losing control, and I knew she'd try harder now, maybe even get reckless, so I made a choice. I decided to give her the illusion of permission. It was a Saturday afternoon when I set the final piece in motion. I told her I had to be out of town for a work event, a full weekend. I asked her, casually, if she could check in on Julian, maybe bring him dinner, make sure he was okay. She didn't even hesitate. "Of course," she said. "Anything for him." I left that morning with a bag packed, car running, smile on my face. What she didn't know was that I had never left the city. I drove 10 minutes away, parked in a friend's garage, and set up my laptop. The camera I had hidden in the living room clock was connected to a private streaming server. Every angle was visible, the audio crisp, the microphone hidden beneath the couch cushions would capture everything. I had alerts set on Julian's phone, and the front door camera was set to notify me the second she arrived. At exactly 6:08 p.m., she walked in. Julian was in the kitchen, microwaving pizza. He greeted her like any teenager would, polite but distant. She gave him a long hug. He pulled away. She laughed, tried to tousle his hair. He ducked, annoyed, and I watched it all from my laptop. They sat on the couch. She turned on a movie. I could see her inch closer, bit by bit. Her hand brushed his knee. He flinched. She leaned in and whispered something I couldn't hear. But then she made a phone call, right there in my house. I watched as she stepped into the kitchen with the phone pressed to her ear. I turned up the audio, and what I heard sealed everything. She told the person on the other end that she was finally getting time alone with him, that she had waited long enough, that Leona is starting to accept it. She's not fighting anymore. She said word for word, "I think I can tell him how I really feel tonight. I think he's ready." I didn't move for a full minute after she hung up. I just sat there, staring at the screen, heartbeat pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. She was going to confess everything to him, and she thought I was gone. That night, I drove back home, quietly. I parked 2 streets away and walked the rest of the way on foot. Julian was already in his room when I entered through the back door. She was still on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, surprised, back early. I forgot something. I said. She smiled. "Julian's been great. We had a nice talk." I smiled too, but mine wasn't fake. Because now I had everything. I waited until she left. I hugged my son tighter than usual that night. He didn't ask why. He just held me back and said, "I'm glad you're home." When he went to sleep, I uploaded the recording of her call to 3 different folders. I backed up every second of the video from that evening. I even saved still images of her touching him without permission. And then I started preparing the list, every person who needed to hear the truth. Her boss, her landlord, her new boyfriend, our extended family, the school board. A few of them would receive the video anonymously. A few would get it directly from me. And one person, just one, would get everything at once. Because the next phase wasn't about building the case. It was about letting her believe she still had a chance, letting her fall deeper. So when I pulled the ground from beneath her feet, it would hurt. It would echo, and she'd never forget who gave her that fall. She had no idea her time was running out. No clue that with every fake smile, every overstepped boundary, every lie she whispered into my son's ears, she was dragging herself deeper into a trap she couldn't escape. And I, the one she thought was naive, was the very person pulling the strings. She believed she was getting away with it, that Julian's slight distance was just a teenage phase, that my silence was forgiveness. But I wasn't silent. I was calculating, and it was time to make her pay. The night I caught her making that phone call, whispering about my son like he was a secret, she was finally ready to claim something inside me snapped in a way that didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't even shake. It just settled, cold, clear, final. I had watched that video a dozen times. I'd listened to her say she thought he was ready. As if love was something she could bend into her image. As if I would ever let that kind of darkness win. That night changed everything, not because I was shocked anymore, but because I now understood exactly what kind of war I was in, and I was done playing defense. Alyssa's charm had always been her weapon. To the outside world, she was kind, warm, generous, the cool aunt, with perfect hair, easy smiles, and an Instagram full of inspirational quotes. No one knew what lived beneath her polished surface. Not even Julian, not fully, but I did, and now I had proof, so I started making quiet moves behind the scenes. First, I went to the school, not to start a scandal, not yet, but to protect my son from any more unsupervised time with her. I told the counselor, in confidence, that a certain relative had been overstepping boundaries and making Julian uncomfortable. I didn't give details, not then, but I told them we were documenting things and needed them to be alert. They took me seriously. More than that, they supported me. Second, I contacted Alyssa's ex-boyfriend, the one she'd said had trust issues. I sent him a short message, no names, just a question. Did Alyssa ever get too close to someone she shouldn't have? The reply came an hour later. Yes, she made me block a friend's son once. She was obsessed. Why? And just like that, I knew it wasn't just Julian. There was a pattern. Now that I had confirmation, I called a lawyer. I asked about legal boundaries, what constituted grooming, how to report it properly, how to protect Julian's name while still holding Alyssa accountable. I didn't want revenge that screamed. I wanted the kind that stuck, the kind that exposed her for who she really was and kept her away from any child forever. That weekend, I invited Alyssa over again. She thought it was a peace offering. She brought her favorite wine, wore a floral dress, acted like we were just two sisters rebuilding a bond. I played along. I even let her cook. I needed her comfortable, too comfortable to notice that my phone was recording from the windowsill. Julian's been quieter lately, she said while stirring sauce on the stove. I think he misses having me around more. I kept my voice steady. He's been figuring things out, growing up. She smiled, growing up fast. There was something in the way she said that like she meant something I wasn't supposed to catch. But I did. Every word, every tone, I caught it all. Over dinner, I asked questions that seemed innocent. So what made you want to be so close to him? I mean, really? She paused, took a sip of wine. I don't know. He's just sensitive. I see myself in him, you know. I nodded. I think he needs someone who understands how special he is, and I think you're too strict to see it sometimes. I stared at her, trying not to let the rage in my chest reach my face. You think I don't know my own son? I asked calmly. She smiled again. I think he trusts me more than you realize. And that was it. That was the moment I knew she wouldn't stop unless I made her. After she left that night, I sent the recording to my lawyer and to Julian's therapist. We decided it was time to report her formally, not to press charges yet, but to create a documented record of concern. We filed a report under my son's initials, attached the evidence, and requested an evaluation of her behavior through Child Protection Services. They told me it could take time, but they'd start investigating. That wasn't enough. I needed to shake her world, so I arranged for something she'd never expect, a family brunch. I invited our parents, our cousins, even a few friends she hadn't seen in years. I told them I was hosting a reconciliation gathering, that I wanted everyone to see how well Alyssa and I were doing. She showed up glowing, excited to be the center of attention again. She hugged our mother, complimented everyone, laughed a little too loud, and then I stood up. I just want to say something. I told the room about healing and truth. Alyssa looked nervous. I looked at her directly and said, sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who cross the line the furthest, and sometimes the only way to protect the ones we love is to say things out loud even when it hurts. Everyone went quiet. Our mother looked between us. What are you talking about? And I said, Alyssa, I know what you've been doing with Julian, and so does everyone in this room now. The silence after that was thunderous. Alyssa laughed at first, tried to make it a joke. What are you even saying? But I pulled out my phone, played the voicemail, the one where she told someone she thought Julian was ready. The words played into the air like poison. And no one was laughing now. Our father stood up. Is this real? I nodded, every second of it. Alyssa turned white. She stammered. You misunderstood. It's not like that. He's like a son to me. He is my son, I said. And you'll never be near him again. She ran out of the house. The next day, I found out she had lost her job. 2 days later, her boyfriend blocked her. By the end of the week, Child Services had officially opened an investigation. And that was only the beginning, because what she still didn't know was that I wasn't done yet. She vanished like smoke after that brunch, like a guilty shadow dissolving into silence. No calls, no messages. Not a single knock at my door. For the first time in years, my house felt clean, like the energy inside it could finally breathe. But peace, no, I hadn't earned that yet, because I knew Alyssa wasn't gone. She was hiding, and the thing about people like her is, they never vanish until they choose to. She was waiting for the storm to pass. She believed that if she just stayed quiet long enough, people would forget. That my son would miss her, long for her, even beg me to let her back into his life. She was wrong. After that confrontation, Julian didn't say much. He had seen me speak the words out loud in front of our family, and while he didn't cry or yell or even thank me, there was something different in his eyes. Like the armor I had worn finally gave him permission to take off his own. But a silence lingered between us, one that wasn't built on pain anymore, it was built on questions. And one night, he finally asked them. It was after dinner, both of us sitting on the couch while a movie played, but neither of us watched it. He turned to me slowly, voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, do you think she ever really loved me?" The question hit harder than anything Elisa ever did. I didn't rush my answer. "I think she loved how you made her feel," I said gently. But real love, safe love, never asks you to hide or lie or feel uncomfortable just to keep it. That wasn't love, Julian. That was control. He didn't cry. He just nodded. And in that moment, I knew that the damage she'd done hadn't broken him, but it had changed him. And I needed to make sure she never had the chance to do it again. That's when I remembered something, a folder I had almost forgotten I created. See, months before everything exploded, I had started documenting Elisa's behavior in a shared Google Drive. Photos, screenshots, voice notes, copies of texts she'd sent Julian late at night. I had backed up every single thing just in case, and now I knew exactly what to do with it. It was time to make her name carry the same shame she made my son feel. I began by contacting a local nonprofit that specialized in helping victims of grooming and boundary violations. They were discreet, deeply professional, and most importantly, fierce advocates for awareness. I told them my story, shared the recordings, the texts, and even that sickening voicemail. They were horrified and determined. With their help, I wrote a blog post. Not with names, not at first, but with details. Real details, descriptions of how grooming hides behind compliments, how it pretends to be connection or mentorship, how it always starts with praise and ends with possession. It was raw, honest, unflinching. It ended with a chilling line, "This isn't fiction. This is my son's truth, and I won't be silent anymore." We published it under a pseudonym, but it spread like wildfire. Within days, the blog post was shared across parenting groups, trauma survivor networks, even picked up by a mid-sized online magazine focused on child safety and digital wellness. The comment sections exploded with mothers, fathers, survivors all saying, "Thank you. This happened to us too." It struck a nerve, and that's when I revealed her name, quietly, just once. I went back to that post, added a line. Her name was Elisa Bennett. That was all it took. Someone recognized her, then another. And another, soon enough, stories started pouring in, not just about Julian, but about other young people she'd mentored. A girl in her early 20s who said Elisa was overly affectionate with her at 15. A teenage boy she used to tutor who said she sent him late. Night selfies. None of it had been enough on its own, too subtle, too gray, too easy to dismiss. But together, it painted a pattern so clear it couldn't be denied. The nonprofit compiled the testimonies, verified identities, and formally submitted a report to the state's Department of Children and Families. Meanwhile, I made one final move, one I knew would strike where it hurt most. Elisa always prided herself on her reputation. She ran a side business as a teen confidence coach online with a small but loyal following. I used a fake account to schedule a consultation call with her. She still didn't know who was behind the takedown. When she answered the Zoom call, I revealed myself, her face drained of all color. "I know what you're doing," she spat, trying to sound powerful. "No," I said. "You knew what you were doing. I'm just showing the world. You're ruining my life." I leaned forward. "You almost ruined my son's." Then I ended the call. That was the last time I saw her face. Days later, her website was gone. Her socials wiped clean, and a quiet announcement was posted on her former coaching page. "Due to personal health issues, Elisa Ben, it will no longer be accepting clients." But I wasn't done yet. I took all the remaining evidence, every email, message, voice note, and report, and gave it to Julian. I sat with him on his bed, handed over the flash drive, and said, "This is yours now, not because you have to carry it, but because I want you to know I believed you, I protected you, and I will always choose you." He didn't say anything. He just hugged me. For the first time since everything began, he hugged me like a child who knew he was safe. And as his arms wrapped around my waist, I finally felt something I hadn't dared let in for months. Relief, but we weren't at the end yet, because the final blow, the one she never saw coming, was still waiting in the wings, and it would be delivered in front of more eyes than she ever imagined. 2 months later, the town's local TV network announced a special segment as part of their Weekend Voices of the Victims series, a televised roundtable focused on Survivor, led stories about hidden grooming inside families and friend circles. The nonprofit I had worked with, they had submitted my blog post. The producers read it and contacted me immediately. I had never planned to go public with my face or name. But the more I sat with it, the more I thought about Julian and every child like him who never had a voice. The answer became obvious. It was time to stop hiding. I said yes. The taping would be live. Not pre-recorded, not edited. Live. They wanted truth in its rawest form, so I gave it to them. The studio was small, intimate, maybe 3 cameras, 1 long table, 4 women seated under the soft halo of overhead lights. Beside me sat a school counselor, a therapist who specialized in adolescent trauma, and a mother who lost her son to suicide after years of silent abuse by a trusted family friend. Her voice was shaky. Mine was not. I owed Julian that much. They introduced me with soft music and respectful narration. A mother came forward with a blog post that shook thousands. Today, she speaks publicly for the first time. The camera zoomed in. And I began. "I'm not here for revenge," I said calmly. "I'm here because my son almost forgot how to feel safe in his own home." I described it all: the texts, the late night conversations disguised as bonding, the emotional manipulation dressed up as mentorship. I didn't flinch, I didn't hold back, and I named her again, Alyssa Bennett. The name hung in the air like smoke. I watched the host blink, slowly, processing the weight of it. "And who was she to you?" I took a deep breath. "She was my sister." You could feel the air leave the room. There was no going back now. I told them about the baby shower brunch, how I'd exposed her in front of everyone. The time she brushed off Julian's discomfort. How she cornered him with her advice that felt more like ownership. I told them how predators don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like someone you trusted enough to share a childhood with. The therapist beside me nodded, then added, "That's the hardest truth for many people to hear. We're taught to look for strangers, but most abuse happens inside the house, from someone close, someone you'd never suspect." When the segment ended, there was no applause. Just a heavy, sacred silence, a kind of reverence for the pain that had just been aired in the open. I thought that would be the end, but it wasn't, because somewhere out there, Alyssa was watching, and she made the mistake of responding. The day after the segment aired, she posted a lengthy Facebook status, the first public message since her disappearance. She denied everything, said I was jealous of her closeness with Julian, claimed I had twisted a beautiful relationship into something sick, that I was a bitter woman whose divorce made her paranoid. She even said, "He was the one who came to me. I never crossed a line." That one sentence undid her entire defense, because embedded inside that post was an admission. "He came to me." She was referring to a child. A minor, one she was grooming for emotional dependency. She confessed unintentionally that there had been a relationship at all, and the internet didn't miss it. Her post went viral for all the wrong reasons. Screenshots were shared, memes were made. Even advocacy groups used her post as a case study in what emotional grooming looks like from the predator's side. She deleted the post after 2 days, but it was too late. The network re-aired the segment a week later, this time with a follow-up. Alyssa Bennett speaks out. Our experts respond. A panel of psychologists broke down her post line by line, explained how her language was textbook deflection, how her use of words like jealous, twisted, and beautiful were subtle tools used by manipulators to confuse the narrative. She was exposed, publicly, clinically, and permanently. Her old coaching clients began demanding refunds. Parents filed complaints to the Better Business Bureau. The school where she volunteered for youth mentorship revoked her badge, citing community safety. And then the final domino fell because the nonprofit. They had filed a restraining order on my behalf, not just for me, for Julian. The court date came quickly. She showed up with red eyes and a new lawyer, tried to cry in front of the judge, claimed she was misunderstood. But the evidence was overwhelming: the texts, the voice notes, the testimonials, and finally that Facebook post. The judge granted the order for 5 years, 0 contact with Julian, 0 presence within 200 feet of any child-related program. Her career gone, her image tarnished beyond repair, and her control over my son destroyed. We walked out of that courtroom not as victims, but as survivors who had done the unthinkable, spoken the truth in a world that too often silences the smallest voices. Julian didn't speak until we got to the car. He buckled his seatbelt, looked out the window for a long time, then whispered, "I'm glad you believed me first." I held his hand, and in that moment I realized something. It wasn't about exposing her, it was about healing him.